So this month, I will be doing something a little bit different. For the month of August, I am doing what I'm calling the Sharpening Your Axe Summer Series, nonprofit strategy sessions on sustainability. August is a great time to slow down, to go deep, to learn, to plan, and to prepare for the hustle of the end of the year. Just like Abraham Lincoln said, if you give me 8 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend 6 hours sharpening my axe. So, my goal with this series is to help you sharpen your proverbial organizational axe during the slower, somewhat days of summer. Each week, I'll be focusing on one of the core elements that make nonprofits strong: fundraising, boards, staff, finance, and organizational direction. Each week, I'll be sharing content that explores the theme from different angles, a combination of short form strategy tips, long form trainings that go deeper into some aspect of the theme, and always an encore podcast episode featuring me in more of a generative conversation with one of my incredible guests, exploring the theme from yet a third angle. These strategy sessions are fire. So grab a notebook, grab a pen, curl up someplace really comfy, and enjoy. Hi, this is the Nonprofit Mastermind podcast, and I'm your host, Brooke Richie-Babbage. Each week, I do a deep dive into the mindset and strategies and tactics and tools of scaling an incredible, high-impact nonprofit. I'm so glad you're here. This is 6-Minute Strategy for Nonprofit Leaders, where I share a quick strategy tip on launching, scaling, or leading your growing nonprofit. This episode focuses on one strategy for increasing and maintaining board engagement throughout the year: creating an engagement map. Now, an engagement map identifies in calendars the specific types and points of engagement for a period of time. In my program, I teach how to create one for the year, and I think it works best that way. Maintaining steady and active board engagement can be tricky, and it can feel like a slog, constantly trying to remember who's excited about what, who asked which questions, whose networks do what could be good to address at board meetings. The result is too often that meaningful touch points can be haphazard or absent altogether, and that real connection only happens at board meetings, which are, to be honest, super boring a lot of the time with lots of reports. It's a lot of pressure on board meetings to do all of the heavy lifting of keeping your board members engaged and excited. So in this episode, I want to talk about ongoing engagement, the interstitial tissue that exists between your meetings and is actually where true connection comes in. And the framework that I use is called the Board Engagement Canvas. So I'm going to walk through the simple steps, and there are 3, for applying this canvas, this board engagement canvas, to your own organization. First, there are 4 types of engagement to include in your canvas: board meetings, board updates, board check-ins, and board inspiration. Board updates are one to group, board check-ins are typically one to one, and board inspiration can be a combination of one to group or one to one. You want to include at least one of each type of engagement every quarter, and you can see each as an opportunity for a generative or strategic touch point, which is always a great way to ignite connection and energy. So first things first, calendar these out. It's that simple. Identify your board meeting dates. Identify 2 check-in dates a year for each board member, monthly or every other month updates, and monthly inspiration. Now, inside the Resource Hub this month, you can find a copy of my board engagement toolkit, A Year in a Day, where you can plan your whole year in one day. And there's a recommended calendar for this first step. The second step is identify your key themes for each quarter. It can be really helpful and strategic to organize your year with your board around an arc, a series of themes that relate to one another and often build on one another, and that allow for connection and engagement around key aspects of the organization, like the board itself, fundraising, and thought leadership. Now, best practice suggests thinking about 4 themes each year. The first, quarter 1, focus on the health and functioning of the board itself. Q2, think about forward movement, thought leadership, programs, cultivation, right? How to maximize and engage with the work. Quarter 3, focus on preparing for your year end. How are we doing? What do we need to do for year end fundraising? And finally, Q4, focus on team building, assessment, and celebration. Now, as you're thinking about your quarterly themes and whether these 4 sort of best practice themes that I've identified apply to you, consider the following in addition. Ask yourself, what are my board members most excited about? Look back at their annual agreements, at board minutes, and try to make sure that that shows up throughout your board touch points throughout the year. What are the organization's goals for the year? And similarly, what are the board's goals for the year? And use those pieces of information to shape your quarterly themes. So the second step is to map out the key themes for each quarter. Brainstorm some examples and ways that each theme can apply to the specific engagement points you've already calendared, and then link them. Finally, step 3, brainstorm your generative and strategic board agenda topics in advance. Now, these will be refined as you get closer to your meetings, but think about topics that connect to your themes and that build on energy that you've created throughout the year. So that's it. It's a simple 3-part framework for creating your board engagement canvas. You can check out the accompanying toolkit where I go a lot deeper inside the Resource Hub. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of the Nonprofit Mastermind podcast. I always have so much fun doing these episodes. Definitely check out the links to all of the goodies that I mentioned in this episode. You can get that at brookerichiebabbage.com/podcast for the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode and think that you have a friend or colleague who would also enjoy, I would love if you would leave a review and share. Have a great week.